Welcome to our podcast series on child wellbeing with Professor Daryl Higgins from Australian Catholic University. In this series, we explore the mental health of young Australians and how parents can help their children during difficult times. The mental health of the young has been in the spotlight again recently due to the impact of COVID-19. One group, the Parenting and Family Research Alliance, has highlighted the need for more parental help so children's mental health issues can be better dealt with. Daryl Higgins is Director of Australian Catholic University's Institute of Child Protection Studies and is one of the key researchers behind the Alliance. Welcome to Figuring Out Families, Daryl.
Thanks, it's great to be with you and your listeners.
Terrific to have you on board, and we won't tell them some of the technical issues we've had getting here, but it's good to talk to you and to see you. Let's start with the next.
It's called resilience, isn't it?
Oh, it is resilience, and we need that in this day and age, I'll tell you. Let's start with an explanation of the Parenting and Family Research Alliance and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, thanks, David. So the Parenting and Family Research Alliance is a loose collective of academics and people who are involved in design and delivery of programs and services and supports for improving the capacity of parents to parent well. So it could be delivery of structured programs, or it could be delivery of other mechanisms of support to try and enhance the knowledge and the skill set that parents have to do the best job they can for their children. And so a number of us as researchers who are involved in either designing these kind of programs or involved in evaluations or research more generally around parents and parenting came together and said, we need to do better. Our Australian community deserves better. And one way we can help that is for us as researchers to do better. And that is not to be working in our own little silos and often competing with each other for very limited grant funding, but in fact to be working across those silos and to be collaborating. And so we came together. And we have been working on a number of projects, such as the one that I think has come to your attention, a review piece that looks at, well, what in fact is the value of parenting interventions and what's their evidence base in terms of addressing children's health and wellbeing issues and the satisfaction and wellbeing of parents as well.
Okay, no, fair enough. COVID, of course, has been a big issue across the board. But is it true to say that young people have been impacted more so than other age groups, or just differently? I mean, we understand that a lot of elderly people have died, obviously, during COVID, but it seems to be impacting or affecting a lot of young people now, especially.
That's right. And I think that I would say probably it's affecting them differently. I think there probably hasn't been that comparison work yet to say, you know, it's more or less than other age groups. I think every age group has felt the impacts, but in a different way. Certainly working families have experienced it in terms of having to juggle the issue of children learning at home. And I'm from Victoria, and certainly we experienced that much more strongly and for a longer period of time than many other states and territories, but I think to a degree everyone across Australia has experienced that. We certainly know the health impacts for the elderly and particularly the vulnerable, so those in aged care and mental health and disability facilities and services. We know that they've been very significantly impacted. But children and young people, absolutely. There was a report recently from the National Children's Commissioner highlighting this very issue. There have been lots of reports highlighting that the lack of engagement with school systems has been to the detriment of children and young people. And I also know that in terms of their engagement with what we call, child welfare services, including at the most pointy end, involvement with statutory child protection services, we know that there's been a bit of a hiatus, particularly in those jurisdictions where there has been a stronger lockdown and for longer periods. Internationally, there's been evidence to show that there's been a reduction in the number of reports of concerns about children's welfare and more importantly, from my point of view, a reduction in the access to the kind of welfare supports, including access to parenting programs like we're talking about for families during COVID. However,
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't just see it as a bad thing. We should also see it as an opportunity. And I've heard from many service providers how they've actually had to switch to online service delivery. There's many evidence-based parenting programs that are available online, and there's also kind of new models of practice that are starting to operate. Just as many of us who see a GP regularly have seen, well, there's other ways of seeing a GP other than driving or catching public transport to visit your GP. You can see her or him online. And so that's kind of the way in which I think, as a community, we've had to do that. But of course, whether children and young people are equally being the target of those adaptations and are able to take it up and benefit from that, I think only time will tell.
Yes, and you mentioned Melbourne, and I'm in Melbourne too, of course, and we went through 6 lockdowns, and more so than any other state. So you'd expect that in the years ahead, there could be some issues there with young people. The lockdowns were particularly tough, especially the 6th one, I think, last year.
Yes, although of course we also see that there are some small groups of children and young people who benefited, and often it's those who were struggling with the kind of typical engagement that is expected of them in schools and other social environments. So we know that children who might be on the autism spectrum disorder may in fact have appreciated the different way of operating and able to be in control of their own environment, perhaps more than they could be at school. So we have to remember that there's a diversity, if you like, of experiences, and we need to be thinking of ways of catering best to the diverse needs of children and young people, their parents and their families and communities more broadly.
Sure. Darryl, you say that parents need quicker and more improved access to evidence-based support programs to address these rising mental health problems. Is that one of your key findings in the media release that I read a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, that's right, David. And I suppose for 2 reasons. One is that we know that there's a very significant body of research showing the positive impacts that engagement with various types of parenting programs, so be they structured parenting programs or more broadly kind of parent support systems, and that could be delivered through through schools and through other kind of community agencies, ranging from very low intensity support such as having positive parenting messages in kind of newsletters and in kind of community engagement processes, through to what we think of as the more structured kind of programs where you go along to a class and you hear from an expert about a particular issue, through to the most intensive kind of supports for parents where they're really struggling with children with very significant behavioural or conduct problems, and are needing specialised and targeted supports in order to be able to improve their parenting practices and, more importantly, respond to their children's needs. And we know, of course, that that also changes over time, that the needs that a family might have when they're dealing with a newborn baby are quite different to, a child of, early school age or a teenager. And that's one of the things that evidence-based parenting programs are responsive to, is where in that parenting journey are you, and how are you able to be child-focused and change and adapt your kind of parenting style and the kind of routines and rules that you might have in place in the household to be flexible and adaptive as children develop and their needs change.
I certainly remember when our kids were very young, 2, 3, 4. I'm glad I wouldn't want to revisit those years in some respects. Lack of sleep and the terrible twos, and it was an interesting period of when the kids are that young, I tell you.
Yeah, look, and that's a really interesting point, David, and that is that everybody needs help and support at some time. It can be very minimal help and support. It could be just, yep, we understand that this is a difficult thing, and these are the kind of experiences that other parents at your age and stage of life will be going through, to kind of normalize that. But I think that everyone also would value some, concrete kind of actions that they can take to kind of either reinforce the good stuff that they're doing, or
Mm.
perhaps, learn about some different approaches that they might want to try out and see if they're effective. And that's really the main point that we make in this paper, is that despite the significant evidence of positive impacts in a whole range of issues to do with children's behaviour, children's health, children's well-being, and parenting skills and knowledge, and parent well-being, relationship satisfaction, all of those things, despite that in very significant body of evidence to show that it works, very few parents get access to those programs.
Mm.
And there's very little funding for that. And unfortunately, often the access comes when there's a very significant problem, and parents might be coming to the attention of a welfare agency, or even directly with a child protection agency, and they get a referral to say, you need to attend a parenting program. And our point is that's too little, too late, when we know that all parents need support along the way, and that it can be delivered, and we have the evidence base to show what is effective in improving parenting practices, and ultimately in improving the well-being of children and of families.
Yeah, and the first few years especially, you feel like you're fumbling around in the dark. None of us know, especially with the first baby, what you're doing, whether it's right, wrong, or whatever. And I think we're all in the same boat. You learn as you go along, and probably the bigger family you have by the time you get to number 5 or 6. And I came from a family of 6. I think mum and dad were fairly confident they were getting things right. But
Yeah, and also, of course, learning from experience is an important thing. But often now, when we have much smaller families, typically there isn't that opportunity to kind of keep practicing until you get it right.
no,
And sometimes there's opportunities that get missed along the way to actually improve and learn for the older child. And
yeah.
she or he deserves just as much as younger children to have grown up in environments with parents who are skilled and confident and supported.
Sure. What more needs to be done? Is it just a matter of governments providing more money to different agencies, or are there other things that can be done?
Yeah, look, I do think government funding is an important step, but it's only one step. And one of the things that I often talk about is the need for these services to be available in places that parents want them. So, yeah, going off and signing up at a specific kind of relationship service, or child and family welfare service to do a parenting program may work for some people. But what we also know is that parents typically say that they trust and want to receive advice from sources like their local school. So they'll trust the teacher,
Yeah,
and they'll want to receive that advice from the teacher. Same with early childhood education and the importance of childcare educators to be that source of advice and support. Equally, the health system is a really important one. We know that, right from the beginning, one of the most trusted sources of advice and support is the maternal and child health nurse. They're called different things in
mm,
different parts of the country.
yes,
But then we often have a gap. So, your baby's born and there's very little or no contact going forward. But yet we do have typically fairly regular contact with GPs and the health system in that sense. So being able to get advice and support from your local GP clinic, whether it be that that funding allows a practice nurse at each GP clinic to be skilled in delivering some of that kind of support and advice, and more importantly, being able to refer on when they know that there's a greater level of intensity of support that's required. Same with schools, and I hear some really positive stories of things like family support workers being located in schools. My question is, why isn't that in every school? Why aren't we as a community valuing children and families, and valuing the role of parents to provide what we know are evidence-based supports?
sure. Are you talking about primary schools or across primary and secondary schools?
Let's start with primary, but I think it should be right across, because we know that the challenges of parenting are likely to be different
Yeah,
in secondary school and the kind of skills that you might need and the kind of adaptations that you might need to have to the way in which you parent and care for your children are likely to be different.
Sure. And as we know, yeah, I mean, the teenage years can be problematic around year 9, year 10. Kids can go a little bit off the planet at times, and it's probably that stage where parents need some help as well.
That's right, you know,
Yeah.
and of course, parents go off the planet at different points for a whole range of reasons. And we know
Guilty,
that
guilty.
yeah. Some parents, you know, suffer from very particular challenges, and it might be their own mental health challenges. It might be because of, an issue such as intellectual disability or another form of challenge in their lives that's making it difficult for them to provide the best support available. They might be suffering from a relationship breakdown, or they might be experiencing family violence. And so how do we tailor the access to, you know, parenting programs and supports to meet the challenges and the needs that parents have across the life cycle, but to also need to address the kind of diversity of need that they have? And the reality is that there are parenting programs that are not just generic,
Mm,
but are tailored to meeting some of those specific needs of, you know, parents who have some of those real challenges, including, you know, drug and alcohol issues. And we shouldn't be, just kind of, you know, throwing children under the bus by saying parents who have these challenges don't deserve to be a parent and they should just pull their socks up. The reality is they have complex lives. They deserve support to be the best parents that they can, and their children deserve to have their parents be supported in that way. I've got to say, one of the most striking things in my entire career as a researcher in this space was talking with children and young people who were in out of home care. And one of the main reasons for removal from the care of their parents was issues to do with drug and alcohol misuse and broader family violence. And when I said to those children, about their experiences and asked them, you know, how they felt about being in out of home care and, you know, what they would like to see happen. And if there was a message that I could give to the person in charge, you know, if I was speaking to the minister who's responsible for the systems that are meant to be supporting them, what would they want me to say?
yeah,
And consistently, the message was, get the help for my parents that I need, that they
yeah,
need. You know, so they recognized that there was a lack of supports to be able to address the obstacles that were getting in the way of doing the best job of parenting that they could.
sure. No,
So we need to listen to children. They
yeah,
have the wisdom, and it's unfortunate that as a society, and I've got to say that that piece of research I did was more than 20 years ago. No, but just coming on 20 years ago now, and we're still at the same point where we know that
mm,
parents are not getting access to the programs that we know can help and support them.
yeah. No, that's a very good point. There's some strategies parents can adopt to assist their children if there are places they can go, or I'm just not sure. I mean, my kids are much older now, so I can't remember. But I remember the maternal child nurse that you mentioned earlier. But are there
Yes.
places parents can go to seek help?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the sources of support that many parents do turn to is things like online supports. And of course, you know, the online world out there is a bit of a brave new world.
Yes.
It's a wild frontier, but there are some evidence-based sources of support, and one of the best ones, funded by government, is the Raising Children's Network.
Okay.
So RCN, if you Google it, it's got an incredible amount of advice and support, and also capacity to be able to link you into, you know, getting further help and support. There's a number of agencies that are typically working in this space. So Relationships Australia run a lot of programs, as do almost any of the cares, you know, Catholic Care, Anglicare, BAP Care, etc. There's a whole range of agencies that you can reach out to. There's family relationship centres that are funded through the family law system to try and prevent relationship breakdown. And of course, they do a lot of preventive work in this space in terms of addressing the challenges of relationships and parenting. And of course, the professional groups as well. So the Australian Psychological Society, which I know about, I'm a psychologist, but I'm sure that there's plenty of others as well, such as social workers and so forth, who their professional associations would be able to point people either to individual practitioners or agencies where they can sign up and get this kind of support.
Sure, and there's certainly people need a lot of support. I mean, even before COVID, family issues, family breakdowns, people have always needed support, whether it be the parents, the children, whatever. But you just wonder with COVID in the last 2 years whether those issues have been or have increased dramatically. And I guess we'll see a lot of that unfold in the next couple of years.
That's right.
Yeah. Darryl, we're running out of time. I want to talk to you again at some stage. Some of the main points, if you want to just recap, that you would like to highlight from this podcast.
Yeah, thanks, David. So, I think the main point is that we know that all parents need and deserve to get support at different times in their life. We can all benefit from having that. We know that there's a range of different programs that can help and support, and they vary in their intensity and they vary in the kind of issues that they're trying to resolve, from really simple, positive parenting supports and strategies from schools and newsletters and community radio stations, through to intensive supports for those parents who've got very particular needs and whose children have particular challenges that may require an adjustment or a different way of approaching the complex but rewarding task of parenting. And I think that as a community, we deserve to do better for our children, and we deserve to do better for our parents to support them in doing the best job they can.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and you're right. It is a very rewarding experience. I still have memories of pushing my son in a pram at 3 a.m. up and down the hallway because he wouldn't sleep. That seemed to go on for many, many months, if not years. But I'm sure I'm exaggerating. But very rewarding, and we all get through it at the end.
Absolutely.
Lovely talking to you, Darryl. We'll talk again. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.